The desert wind carried the scent of sage and betrayal across the Apache reservation in southeastern Arizona. Morning light painted the red sandstone cliffs in shades of fire, but Ayana Yazzie felt only the cold stares of her people as she stood before the tribal council. The community center, a modest building that bridged traditional governance with modern necessity, had never felt so suffocating. "You brought outsiders to our sacred land," Chief Thomas Crow Feather's voice cut through the silence like a blade. His weathered face, lined with 60 years of protecting their people, showed no mercy. "You led that documentary crew to the burial grounds." Ayana's hands trembled despite her efforts to remain composed. At 26, she had been the tribe's cultural liaison, a bridge between the old ways and the new world. Her grandmother's turquoise necklace felt heavy against her chest, a reminder of everything she was about to lose. I believed they would help tell our story respectfully," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the packed room. "The world needs to understand our culture, our struggles. Our struggles are not entertainment for them." Elder Maria Sandoval's voice cracked with emotion. The elderly woman who had taught Ayana traditional crafts and stories now looked at her with profound disappointment. "You showed them where our ancestors rest. You betrayed our most sacred trust." The documentary had aired 3 weeks ago. What was supposed to be a respectful portrayal of Apache culture had become sensationalized content, complete with dramatic reenactments at burial sites and misrepresented spiritual practices. Tourists had already begun arriving, seeking the mysterious Apache burial grounds featured in the film. "Banishment," Chief Crowfeather announced, his decision final. "You are no longer welcome among the ND. You have forgotten who you are, Ayana. Until you remember, you walk alone." The formal ceremony that followed felt like a funeral, her own. Traditional songs that once brought her comfort now sounded like a dirge. As the chief removed her tribal identification and community privileges, Ayana felt pieces of her identity crumbling away. Her younger brother Marcus stood in the crowd, tears streaming down his face. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away, bound by tribal law to sever contact. Her childhood friend Sarah pressed her lips together, fighting back sobs but unable to offer support without facing consequences herself. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the Chiricahua Mountains, Ayana packed her few belongings into a battered Honda Civic. The car had been a gift from her late parents, practical people who had worked 2 jobs each to ensure their children could navigate both worlds. Now she was leaving the only world that truly mattered. "You think you're so smart going to college, learning their ways," her cousin Jake had sneered earlier. "But you forgot where you came from." The words stung because they held a grain of truth. Her anthropology degree from Arizona State University had opened doors, but also created distance. She had genuinely believed that education and outside connections could help preserve Apache culture. Instead, she had inadvertently helped exploit it. As she drove away from the reservation for what might be the last time, lightning illuminated the landscape she knew by heart. Every rock formation, every hidden spring, every family grave held memories that would now torment rather than comfort her. Phoenix loomed ahead, a sprawling metropolis where she could disappear, perhaps forever. The city's glittering lights offered anonymity, but no solace. She was Apache girl now, a name whispered with contempt, a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting outsiders. The radio crackled with a weather warning, severe storms approaching, flash flood potential high. Ayana pulled over at a rest stop and sat in her car, watching rain streak down the windshield. Each drop seemed to wash away another piece of who she had been. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You did what you thought was right. That still counts for something." She stared at the message, wondering which friend had risked reaching out, then deleted it without responding. Kindness felt like salt in an open wound. The Phoenix Community College campus buzzed with the energy of a new semester. But Ayanna moved through it like a ghost. She had found work as a teaching assistant in the Native American Studies program. Ironic, considering she was now effectively without a tribe herself. The small apartment she rented in a modest neighborhood near the school was sparse, decorated only with a few photos she couldn't bring herself to put away entirely. "Ms. Yazzie, could you stay after class?" "Doctor." Elizabeth Reeves, the department head, approached her desk as students filed out of the introduction to Southwest Indigenous Cultures classroom. Dr. Reeves was a non-native academic who had dedicated her career to respectful scholarship. Everything Ayanna had tried and failed to achieve. "I've been watching you these past months," Dr. Reeves said gently, settling into a student desk. "You're brilliant, but you're carrying something heavy." "Want to talk about it?" Ayanna organized papers with unnecessary precision, avoiding eye contact. "I'm fine, Dr. Reeves, just focused on work." "I know about the documentary," Dr. Reeves said quietly. "I also know it wasn't your fault how they edited it. Media companies have their own agendas." The words hit like a physical blow. Ayanna's hands stilled on the papers. "It doesn't matter whose fault it was. I should have known better. I should have protected your people, your culture, your sacred spaces." Dr. Reeves nodded. "The burden of being a cultural broker is immense. We're expected to translate between worlds that sometimes can't or shouldn't be translated." That evening, Ayanna drove to South Mountain Park, one of the few places in Phoenix where she could see stars without city light pollution. The desert landscape reminded her of home, but the ache of separation had only deepened with time. She had tried dating, making new friends, building a life in the city, but everything felt hollow. Her phone rang, Marcus's number. Her heart leaped before she remembered that he wasn't supposed to contact her. She let it go to voicemail, then immediately played the message. "Yana?" His voice was strained, frightened. "I can't talk long. There's trouble coming. Men asking questions about the reservation boundaries, about water rights. Strange trucks on the back roads. People are scared, and Chief Crowfeather, he's not well. The stress, the diabetes. I know I'm not supposed to call, but I thought you should know." The message ended abruptly. Ayanna played it 3 more times, passing every word. Water rights disputes had plagued the region for decades, but recent drought conditions had made tensions explosive. Mining companies, agricultural interests, and urban developers all wanted access to the reservation's underground aquifers. She researched late into the night, using her academic access to legal databases and environmental reports. What she found chilled her. A consortium of developers had been quietly filing legal challenges to the reservation's water rights, claiming historical boundaries were incorrectly drawn. If successful, they could gain access to millions of gallons of precious water and potentially force the tribe to relocate. The next day, she called in sick and drove toward the reservation, stopping just short of the boundary. Through binoculars, she observed increased security presence and unfamiliar vehicles. Her trained eye caught details others might miss: surveying equipment, soil samples being taken, men in expensive suits consulting maps. At a gas station in the border town of Wilcox, she overheard conversations that confirmed her worst fears. "Gonna be a lot of construction jobs once they sort out that Indian situation," one worker said. Another replied, "About time someone developed that land properly." Ayanna's hands shook as she filled her gas tank. This wasn't just about water rights. It was about the systematic erasure of her people's homeland. The documentary controversy had been a distraction while real threats materialized in the shadows. She wanted to call Chief Crowfeather to warn him about what she had discovered. But she was still banished, still Apache girl, the traitor who couldn't be trusted. Her information would likely be dismissed as another outsider manipulation. That night she called Dr. Reeves. "I need to take some time off. Family emergency." "How long?" Dr. Reeves asked, concern evident in her voice. Ayana stared out her apartment window toward the distant mountains that marked home. "I don't know. Maybe indefinitely." She spent the next week gathering intelligence, using her academic contacts and research skills to build a comprehensive picture of the threat facing her former tribe. The legal challenges were just the beginning. Environmental impact studies had been waived, permits fast-tracked, and local officials appeared to have been bought off. The consortium had chosen their timing perfectly. The tribe was divided, their leadership aging and overwhelmed, their young people either leaving for cities or struggling with the limited opportunities on the reservation. They were vulnerable, exactly as their enemies preferred. On Friday evening, as she prepared detailed files documenting the conspiracy, Ayana made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She would return home, banishment or not. Her people needed to know what was coming, even if the warning came from a traitor. The early morning air was crisp with autumn's arrival, as Ayana parked her car at the same rest stop where she had cried 6 months earlier. The Chiricahua Mountains stood silhouetted against a sky painted in soft purples and golds, unchanged and eternal despite all the human drama played out in their shadow. She had spent the drive rehearsing what she would say, how she would present her findings, how she would face the contempt and anger that awaited her. The manila folder on her passenger seat contained everything: legal documents, environmental assessments, financial records linking local officials to the development consortium, and aerial photos showing the extent of preliminary surveying already conducted on tribal land. Her first stop was Sarah's house, her childhood friend who had become a tribal council member. Sarah's modest home sat on the edge of the main settlement, surrounded by a carefully tended garden where traditional medicinal plants grew alongside modern vegetables. Ayana knocked softly, her heart hammering. When the door opened, Sarah's face cycled through shock, anger, and something that might have been relief. "You can't be here," Sarah whispered, glancing around nervously. "If anyone sees, they're going to steal our water, Sarah. Maybe our land too." Ayana held up the folder. "I have proof." Sarah's expression shifted from worry to confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Let me in, please. 5 minutes to explain, then I'll leave if you want." Reluctantly, Sarah stepped aside. Her living room was warm and familiar. Family photos, traditional crafts, children's toys scattered on hand-woven rugs. It smelled like sage and coffee, like home. "Talk fast," Sarah said, not offering her a seat. Ayana spread documents across the coffee table, explaining the consortium's strategy, the legal challenges, the pattern of permits and environmental waivers. As she spoke, Sarah's skepticism gradually gave way to alarm. "These companies... I recognize some of these names," Sarah said, studying a financial document. "They've been making donations to local campaigns, sponsoring community events. We thought they were being friendly." "It's called social license," Ayana explained. "Build goodwill before you reveal your real intentions. The water rights challenge is just the opening move. If they win, they can claim our ancestors never had legitimate claim to the underground aquifers." Sarah sank into her chair, the implications hitting her. "The drought's already stressing our wells. If we lose access to the deep water, the reservation becomes unlivable. People would have to relocate." Ayana's voice was quiet but urgent. "It's ethnic cleansing through environmental warfare." A car door slammed outside. Sarah jumped up, peering through the curtains. "It's Marcus. He must have seen your car." Ayana's brother burst through the door moments later, his face a mixture of joy and panic. "Yana, what are you doing here? If the chief finds out, he's going to find out anyway," Ayana said, gathering the documents. "This information needs to reach the tribal council immediately. People need to know what's happening." Marcus looked at the papers spread across the table, his expression growing serious. "Is this why you came back? Not for us?" The question hurt more than Ayana expected. "I came back for all of it. For you, for our people, for our future. I made terrible mistakes, Marcus, but I never stopped being Apache. I never stopped caring about this place." "The chief is sick," Sarah said quietly. "Diabetes complications, stress, the weight of leadership. He had to be hospitalized last week. Some people are saying he should step down." This news hit Ayana like a physical blow. Chief Crowfeather had been a constant in her life, stern but fair, deeply committed to preserving Apache culture while navigating modern challenges. The thought of him suffering, possibly dying while she was in exile, was almost unbearable. "Who's leading the council in his absence?" she asked. "Elder Rodriguez mostly, but he's overwhelmed. We've been dealing with the usual problems: funding shortfalls, youth programs, infrastructure maintenance. Nobody's been looking at the bigger picture." Sarah gestured to the documents. "Nobody's been watching for this kind of threat." A plan began forming in Ayana's mind, risky but necessary. "I need to address the tribal council, tonight if possible. The consortium is moving fast. Some of these permits expire soon if they don't use them. We might only have weeks to mount a legal challenge." "They'll never let you speak," Marcus said. "You're still banished. Some people won't even look at evidence if it comes from you." "Then we need someone else to present it," Ayana replied. "Someone they trust." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. "Elder Sandoval," Sarah said slowly. "She was angry about the documentary, but she's always been fair. If she believes this threat is real—" "She taught me traditional law," Ayana said, hope stirring in her chest. "She knows how to build consensus, how to unite people against a common enemy." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Ayana drove to Elder Sandoval's house, her stomach churning with anxiety. The elderly woman's reaction to seeing her was even colder than expected. "You have courage coming here, child, but courage without wisdom is dangerous." "Please, grandmother." Ayana used the respectful address, though she had lost the right to it. "Look at what I've brought before you, Judge. Our people are in danger." Elder Sandoval's weathered hands moved slowly through the documents, her sharp eyes catching details and implications. The silence stretched until Ayana feared her heart might burst from tension. Finally, the elder looked up. "If this is true, if even half of this is true, we are facing the greatest threat to our survival since the cavalry wars." "It's all true," Ayana said quietly. "I staked everything I had left to gather this information." Elder Sandoval studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps banishment taught you something after all. Perhaps you finally understand what you're fighting for." The tribal council meeting was called for 8 o'clock that evening, but by 7:30 the community center was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through the reservation's informal networks. Something big was happening, something that required every adult's attention. Ayana waited in Sarah's car outside, watching people file into the building. She recognized faces from her childhood, teachers who had shaped her, elders who had shared stories, young parents who were raising the next generation of Apache children. The weight of what she was asking them to risk, their trust in her again, felt overwhelming. Elder Sandoval had agreed to present the evidence, but she had insisted that Ayana be present to answer technical questions. "You found this threat," the elder had said. "You must help us fight it, regardless of your status in the tribe." At exactly 8 o'clock, Ayana entered through the back door, keeping her head down as she made her way to a chair near the front. The murmur of conversation died abruptly as people noticed her presence. She felt the familiar weight of hostile stares, but forced herself to remain calm. Chief Crowfeather was absent, still recovering in the hospital. Elder Rodriguez, acting as chairman, called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. He was a good man, but had never wanted the burden of leadership during a crisis. "We have unusual circumstances tonight," Elder Rodriguez began. "Maria Sandoval has requested time to address the council on a matter of urgent concern." Elder Sandoval rose slowly, using her walking stick for support. At 82, she remained one of the tribe's most respected voices, a keeper of traditional knowledge and a fierce protector of Apache rights. "My relatives," she began in Apache, then switched to English for those more comfortable in that language. "What I am about to share will anger you, it will frighten you, but most importantly, it must motivate you to action." She outlined the water rights conspiracy methodically, displaying documents on an overhead projector, explaining legal implications and environmental consequences. The room grew progressively quieter as the scope of the threat became clear. "These companies believe we are weak," Elder Sandoval continued. "They believe we are divided and distracted. They believe we will not fight for our future because we are too busy fighting each other." Murmurs of anger began rippling through the crowd. Ayana saw her cousin Jake's face reddening with rage, saw her former teacher Mrs. Martinez clutching her husband's arm in alarm. "The person who discovered this plot," Elder Sandoval said, her voice growing stronger, "was one of our own, a daughter of the ND who made grave mistakes but never stopped loving her people." All eyes turned to Ayana. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely relieved. The truth was finally in the open. "I know many of you no longer trust Ayana Yazi," Elder Sandoval continued. "I know her actions brought shame and pain to our community, but tonight she has brought us something more valuable than trust. She has brought us the chance to survive." Elder Rodriguez called for questions. The first came from Jake, predictably hostile. "How do we know this isn't another trick, another way for outsiders to manipulate us?" Ayana stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "You don't have to trust me," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "Trust the documents. Hire your own lawyers to verify them. Contact environmental groups, tribal rights organizations, anyone you choose. But do it quickly, because we don't have much time." More questions followed, increasingly technical. Ayana answered each one precisely, drawing on her research skills and academic training. Gradually, she sensed the mood shifting from suspicion to grim acceptance of the threat's reality. Sarah stood up. "I move that we authorize an immediate legal response to these water rights challenges. We need lawyers, environmental consultants, and political allies. This fight will cost money we don't have, and energy we can barely spare, but the alternative is losing everything." The motion passed unanimously. Marcus rose next, his weathered hands gripping the back of the chair in front of him as he found his voice. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across the deep lines of his face, emphasizing the gravity of his words. "I also move that we formally acknowledge Ayana Yazi's service to the tribe in uncovering this threat." His voice carried across the packed community center, each word deliberate and weighted with years of consideration. "Whatever mistakes she made in the past, and we all know what they were, she has proven where her loyalty truly lies. She risked everything to bring us this information, knowing full well she might be turned away at our borders once again." The silence that followed stretched painfully through the room, thick as smoke from a dying fire. People shifted uncomfortably in their folding chairs, the metal creaking softly. Some stared at their hands, others at the worn linoleum floor. The weight of collective memory pressed down on everyone present. The documentary, the betrayal, the years of bitter division it had caused within their community. Ayanna could feel the tension radiating from every corner of the room, could sense the internal battles being fought in dozens of hearts and minds. Then Elder Martinez, the tribal historian whose knowledge of their people stretched back 7 generations, slowly pushed himself to his feet. His joints protested audibly, but his voice was strong and clear when he spoke. "I second the motion." The simple words carried the authority of his position, of his decades of service to their people, of his role as keeper of their collective memory. "This young woman has walked a difficult path, but she has found her way back to us when we needed her most. Our ancestors would recognize the courage it took to return bearing such dangerous truths." The floodgates opened then. One by one, others rose to support the motion, each standing creating a ripple effect through the assembled crowd. Maria Santos, whose family had known Ayanna since childhood, stood with tears in her eyes. Tom Bigay, who had served with Ayanna's father in Vietnam, rose with military precision. Dr. Elena Crow Dog, the reservation's head physician, stood with her arms crossed, but her expression softening. Not everyone joined them. Jake remained stubbornly seated in the 3rd row, his jaw set and his eyes hard, along with several others who couldn't find it in their hearts to forgive the documentary incident. The wounds were still too fresh, the sense of betrayal too raw. But a clear majority stood, creating a forest of bodies throughout the community center, and Elder Rodriguez called for the formal voice vote with visible emotion tightening his throat. "All in favor?" His voice cracked slightly as dozens of voices responded with a resounding "aye" that seemed to shake the building's foundations. "Opposed?" The handful of nays were outnumbered, but no less sincere in their conviction. "Motion carries," he announced, his voice thick with emotion and the weight of historical significance. The words seemed to hang in the air, transforming something fundamental in the room's atmosphere. Ayanna felt hot tears streaming down her cheeks as the meeting began its gradual transition into tactical planning. The salt of them tasted like relief and redemption, like coming home to a place she had feared was lost to her forever. She wasn't fully forgiven. That would take time, maybe years of proving herself over and over again. The road to complete reconciliation stretched long ahead, marked by necessary steps of rebuilding trust and demonstrating commitment. But she was no longer Apache girl, the traitor whose name had become synonymous with betrayal in whispered conversations. She was Ayanna Yazzie again, a daughter of the ND with a recognized role to play in their collective survival, a voice that would be heard in the councils that would determine their future. The next morning dawned grey and cool, with wisps of cloud clinging to the mountain peaks like prayers. Ayanna drove the winding road to the regional medical center, her truck's engine echoing off the red rock formations that had watched over her people for millennia. She carried with her a small bundle of sage that her grandmother had blessed years ago, along with a thermos of the coffee Chief Crow Feather had always preferred, strong enough to wake the dead, as he used to say with his rare smile. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and industrial-grade cleaning products, a sharp contrast to the earthy sense of home. Her footsteps echoed in the sterile corridors as she made her way to the cardiac wing, past rooms filled with the quiet suffering of people torn from their natural environments and forced to heal under artificial lights. Chief Crowfeather looked smaller in the hospital bed than she remembered, diminished by the tangle of wires and tubes that connected him to machines that beeped and hummed with electronic persistence. Age and illness had carved new lines into his face, and stress had turned his remaining hair completely white, but his eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes that had seen through every excuse and evasion she had ever attempted as a child, remained unchanged, alert and piercing as a hawk's. "So," he said without preamble, his voice raspier than before, but still carrying the authority that had guided their people through decades of challenge, "the exile returns with gifts." There was no accusation in his tone, but there was evaluation, the careful assessment of a leader who had learned to measure people's worth in their actions rather than their words. "I return with debts to pay," Ayana replied, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair beside his bed. The honesty felt cleansing, like stepping into a cold stream after a long day's journey. "To you, to our people, to the ancestors whose resting places I failed to protect when I was too young and too angry to understand what I was risking." After years in exile, Ayana returns and faces Chief Crow Feather, who scrutinizes the woman she has become. When asked what exile taught her, she speaks of identity, resilience, and the true meaning of being Apache, not perfection, but loyalty to one's people. The chief acknowledges her growth, invoking her grandfather's wisdom about strength forged through hardship. As a storm gathers over the sacred mountains, Ayana no longer sees it as a threat, but as a sign of renewal. Ahead lies a brutal legal battle against a powerful development consortium, backed by wealth and political influence. But they underestimated the unity of the Apache people and never anticipated that the one to challenge them would be someone who had learned to navigate both their world and her own without forgetting where she truly belonged.